I would like to welcome everyone tonight to the Task-Based Language Teaching webinar. This is a 2-hour webinar and it's part 1. Next Tuesday we'll have the second part, which will be another 2 hours. Jeannie Spearman has been teaching ESL for 8 years. She holds a Bachelor of Education degree, post-degree certification in special education, and a Master's education in TESOL. She has worked with a wide variety of students at both the high school and adult level. As the ESL lead teacher in a Canadian high school, she helps support core subject teachers who created inclusive classrooms for newcomer ESL students. Teaching, assessment, student, and teacher support were part of her ESL specialist role. Most recently, she has enjoyed instructing Link students at Norquest in both the full-time day and part-time evening programs. She is currently working as an ESL consultant for Rural Route with the Norquest College in Edmonton. And we are delighted to have her here today to share her expertise with us. And as you can see on the screen, while we're waiting for people to log in, if you could put your name, location, organization, and role in the chat box. And I will hand it over to Jeannie.
So welcome everyone to this web-based webinar, and I will be talking about task-based language teaching tonight. As Diane has let you know that it is in 2 parts, and I do hope that everybody can hear me clearly. If you can't, please let Diane know. And I'm going to get started because this is quite a condensed, information-heavy session tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and get started so that we can end on time. So as has been said before, this webinar has 2 parts. So in part 1, we will be looking at what a task is, and then we will be discussing Noonan's framework and task design principles. And then in next week's session, we'll be looking at actually designing and assessing tasks. So these webinars will be 2 hours each. So we're going to start by looking at what is a task, and then we will look at what is task-based language teaching. So by the end of part 1A of this workshop, we are going to be able to define what a task is, and we are going to identify some principles for task-based language teaching. So think about what you would do, how you would define the term task. What does it mean to you, and how would you define it? So we are going to look at a couple of definitions and see how closely they fit your thoughts about what the term means. So here is definition 1. And I'm going to give you a couple seconds to read it over. So as you can see, this definition is non-technical and basically non-linguistic. It is how people would respond to the question, what are you doing? These tasks have a non-linguistic outcome, and the individual tasks can be components of a sequence of tasks. So these are examples of what we call real-world tasks. Does this definition fit the definition that you came up with? And now let's look at the second definition. So once again, I'm going to let you have a quick read through what this definition of a task is. So do you think this one is closer to what you had maybe come up with as a definition? In this definition, tasks are activities in which students use language to work purposefully towards an objective. Attention is on meaning, but they might need to focus on grammatical knowledge to convey meaning. The objective may be set by the teacher or by the student. The outcome may be concrete, like a report or a presentation, or it could be something intangible, such as an argument or an agreement. It also involves communicative language with a focus on meaning. The task should be authentic and real world. Tasks should involve learners in various activities that require them to negotiate meaning and make choices in what, when, and how they learn. So as we've seen, the definition of the term task may vary in the literature, but it's widely accepted that a task is a pedagogical activity that has certain features. The following three slides feature 3 task criteria from a research summary on task-based language teaching from the Toronto Catholic School Division's instruction handbook booklet, and they are based on definitions of task by Noonan and Ellis. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to read over each criteria, and I just want you to know that at the back of your handout, we do have the list of resources, so that is where some of our information has come from. So this first task criteria talks about having a clearly defined outcome or a goal. Our second criteria emphasizes focusing on meaning while interacting with the language. And finally, the third criteria discusses learners using their own resources, such as language and ideas. So now we're going to look at a series of activities on a related theme. As you read the description of each activity, think of that activity in terms of the following criteria that we just looked at. The definitions and criteria can also be found on page 2 of your handout. And I'm going to, Diane, can I cut and paste this into the chat box, or would you be able to do that? I just want you to be able to see them as we're going through the examples, because we will be doing a poll on the slides. So we need to think about these as we're reading the slides. So I'm sorry about that. Just 1 second. All right, thank you. Thank you, Diane. So this first example is an example of a writing task. But I want you to really look at, actually, I should call it an activity here, because I want you to decide, is this a task based on the 3 criteria? So as you're reading it, think about those 3 criteria on the side that have been typed into the chat box. It looks like we have most people who have answered, so I'm going to go ahead and publish this. And you're right, we had 18 out of 30 who said that yes, it was, and nobody said no. And the reason that it is a task is because there was a clearly specified outcome and it was an authentic task. So let's have a look at the next one. Again, look at this and decide if you think that this is a task based on the 3 criteria. Okay, this one was pretty close. So although there is a clearly specified outcome, it is actually less authentic than the first task, and there's less communication because everyone has the same picture. So it wouldn't quite be considered a task based on the 3 criteria. Let's look at a speaking task now, and I'll be asking the same question. Is it a task based on the 3 criteria? I hope everyone's had a chance to think about this. I will post the poll once again. You did very well on this one. This one, again, there was a very clearly specified outcome, and it was a very authentic, real-world type task. So let's look at B as another example. So you're right again, those who, the 83%, it looks like you're getting a real good idea of what a task is and what a task isn't. This is actually one of the things that you can do leading up to a task, and it helps, but this here is not a task yet. It is not quite authentic enough. So now let's move on, and we're going to try, oh, sorry about that. We're going to try the listening ones. There's 2 on this page. So basically, I'm just going to ask you if A or B would be the more task-based, based on the criteria. All right, you did really well. Listening task A is definitely an actual task. It's a lot more authentic and a clearly defined, objective. So our last one will be a reading task. Reading activity. And again, choose whether A is more task-like or B is more task-like. Well, thank you for doing that. And you're right. Reading A is definitely more authentic than B. It is something that students would actually have to do within real life as a task. So now that we've had a look at what a task is, we're going to be looking at what task-based language teaching is. Task-based language teaching is part of the communicative language teaching, which is an approach to language teaching that places a premium on the negotiation and communication of meaning. Sorry, I'm going to head that back. So both communicative language teaching, and task-based language teaching view language as action and focus on what the learner can do with the language. Task-based language teaching goes a step further to say that tasks are the basic planning units for language instruction, a useful device for planning a communicative curriculum. Task-based language teaching is one of a number of potential realizations of communicative language teaching. So where activities in a communicative language teaching class might be organized according to functions, themes, projects, or content, a task-based language teaching class will be organized around tasks. In task-based language teaching, it's not enough to just use language like reading and listening to text, discussing a topic, or analyzing language, understanding a grammar point, or using a cloze exercise, or memorizing vocabulary. Instead, language is the means of achieving a clearly specified outcome, and the way language is used in class is similar how it is used in the real world. So if you look in your handout on page 5, there's actually a list of task-based language teaching characteristics. And if you want to, you can use it at some point in time to self-assess your own teaching. So we are going to have a quick look at a short video of Rod Ellis, and it's just an 8-minute video. He's one of the key writers on task-based language teaching, and in this video, he's speaking at a conference. So Diane has put the link in the chat box, so if everyone wants to take a few minutes to view the video, and then we'll come back and discuss.
When you come back, let us know.
Thank you. It looks like we've got some people coming back. And basically, I'm hoping that you kind of noticed the disconnect that Ellis noticed between his teaching and learning and the potential advantages of task-based language teaching. So my question is here, could you relate to Ellis's experience? And did you notice the gap as being some things that he talked about as I have a headache rather than I am having a headache? He also discussed how drilling, what we used to call drill and kill, was not the way. So some of the advantages that he noticed were that his students were more motivated and that the tasks were learner-centered. Okay, now we're just going to look at some of the principles of task-based language teaching. And this is a list of the 7 that Ellis talks about in all of the research. Scaffolding, task dependency, recycling, active learning, integration of form and function, reproduction to creation, and reflection of learning strategies. So scaffolding provides supporting frameworks for learners' language acquisition. And some examples of these is you can pre-teach your vocabulary, or you can provide some visuals, or you can provide sentence frames. So those are just a few examples of how you might scaffold the learning to help a student learn using task-based learning. So then we have task dependency, and tasks should grow out of and build upon each other. And it's important for to organize and sequence your tasks. As for recycling, it activates the organic. So tasks can be related to a theme or issue where the language can be used over and over again. Again, active learning. So they acquire by actively using the language. So you get students to do something using that language. It's very important to the learning and the acquisition of language. Then next we have the integration of form and function. So there's a clear relationship between form and function. And one of the examples is travel. For a travel theme, you could, travel task, you could talk about direction and multi-directional forms. Then we have reproduction to creation. So learners reproduce language from models, and then there's a mastery of form and meaning and function. And then learners should progress through tasks from reproduction activities to production activities where they actually create the language. Then we have reflection and learning strategies. So students need opportunities to reflect upon their learning, and it's important to give them a chance to reflect not only on their learning, but how they achieve the outcome. So we're basically at the conclusion of part 1A. And so far we've looked at, what a task is and what task-based language teaching is. And then in the second half, we're going to have a look at the principle of task design. And here's some things to think about. What do you see as the most useful characteristics of task-based language teaching? And would it work for you and your learners? Were there any red flags or questions related to task-based language teaching? And on that one, I will be answering any questions at the end of the session. And the other thing, think about identifying the one thing that you can do to make your class or a tutoring session more task-based. So again, there's some questions on page 3 and some characteristics on page 4 of the handouts. So this is part B of tonight's session. And it's going to be about task design principles. So by the end of this workshop, or this part of the workshop, we're going to be able to explain Noonan's task framework and create a pedagogical task. So let's look at some different types of tasks and some different activities that may not be tasks, but that also take place in task-based language classroom. So if you look at the task-based language teaching task framework chart on page 8 of your handout, it shows what Noonan sees as the building blocks of task-based language teaching. So right now we're going to have a look at each of these aspects of his framework. So this is what we consider a real world or target task. And these are the 101 things that we do with language every day, from writing a Facebook post to confirming an airline reservation. So consider what real-world or target tasks your learners need to do with language, such as reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Like, what different things could they do under those? Real world can refer to the world that your learner is currently in, or one that they could be heading towards. So whether that's work or education or any of the other things that they're either doing now or might be doing in the future. So this is a sample task. And it says, call the furnace company and reconfirm a furnace tune-up appointment, check other details such as cost of service, time, preferred payment method, and coupon use policy. And here's some ideas of real-world tasks that your learner might need to do in the real world for this particular example. So for listening, they might listen to an automated phone message where somebody's basically telling them the store hours and things like that. Within their reading, they might read an advertisement for that particular store, or they might even read a coupon and look for the terms and conditions of that coupon. For the speaking, they might confirm an appointment, or they might be asking someone the cost, the time for the appointment, and the method of payment. And for the writing, they could be taking notes on what time and the cost and things like that, maybe even the address of where they need to take their vehicle, or sorry, where the business is located. So in order to create learning opportunities in the classroom, we need to transform the real-world tasks into pedagogical tasks. A task is a pedagogical task in which learners use language to accomplish a clearly specified objective or outcome. That is, as is common in the real world, language is used to meet non-linguistical and somewhat authentic goal. Sorry, I just need to take that back one. So there is also a focus on meaning as learners interact with language. Therefore, although learners may give some attention to form, their primary attention is to convey or comprehend meaning rather than manipulate language. Learners also use their own resources, language and ideas, and content they access through the language as they view, listen, read, discuss, and interview to solve problems, convince, teach, design a poster, fill in a form, write an email, and things like that. So although some tasks will likely elicit certain linguistic forms, what learners say and the language that they use is not necessarily specified. Pedagogical tasks are on a continuum from rehearsal tasks to activation tasks. So rehearsal tasks have a clear and transparent relationship to real-world tasks. So here's an example of a rehearsal task. And think about the kinds of rehearsal tasks that you could do in your classroom while you're reading the one that we've given here. Not everything that we do in a class has such a clear connection to real-world task. So activation tasks are those that encourage learners to activate a range of language functions and structures. So this task that we're showing here is an activation task. It's not a rehearsal task because we wouldn't expect that our students need to be prepared to be shipwrecked. It does activate the following functions, however, and language that would be needed in the real world. So they'd be able to make suggestions, they would agree or disagree, they would negotiate, they could be talking about quantity, how much, how many. But learners are not constrained by using a particular lexis or structure. So task-based language teaching doesn't mean that you do everything, that everything you will do will be directly related to real life. However, everything that you do should be working on skills that transfer to real life. On page 8 and 9 of your handout, there are examples of real-world tasks and two types of pedagogical tasks, rehearsal and activation. However, not everything we do in a task-based language teaching class is actually a task. Sometimes you will be building the language, skills, and knowledge that learners need to complete these tasks. Noonan calls these types of activities enabling activities. These are form-focused activities that you do that are designed to develop language, skills, and knowledge your students need to accomplish tasks. We can do this through language exercises and communicative activities. So language exercises can focus on lexis, phonology, grammar, even functions. These are the stuff of traditional language teaching. On their own, these are separate from how language is actually used to accomplish things. In task-based learning teaching approach, how would these be used? They're used to support a task. What type of task might they be supporting? Maybe learners will be reading an article in a job seeker's handbook or exploring career paths. Maybe learners will be holding a getting to know you conversation class. And what is the difference between an exercise and a pedagogical task? An exercise looks at whether the learner got the language right. A pedagogical task looks beyond the language to, did the learners pick the best apartment based on the information? Or did the learners choose the right clothes to wear for the weather? Communicative activities are a compromise between language exercises and tasks. They have some elements of meaningful communication, but learners may still be manipulating form. So here we see the difference between an enabling activity and tasks. So with the enabling activities, the focus is on whether or not the learner got the language right. In tasks, there's an outcome that goes beyond the language. So here's a little review of the task framework. So in the slides that follow, we're going to look at some different activities, and we're going to try and identify whether each activity is a rehearsal task, an activation task, a language exercise, or a communicative activity. So have a look at this one and decide if it's A, rehearsal, B, activation, C, language, or D, communicative activity. Okay, I think I'll take it from there. So definitely most of you have decided that it was D, which is a communicative activity, and that's exactly what it is. It's focused on using the words can and can't. So here's another one. Once again, see if you can guess whether it's a rehearsal, an activation, language exercise, or communicative activity. So C is the right answer. It is a language exercise, and it's basically focused on grammatical structure. So let's try this one. Can, or can't. So basically, we had some people who thought it was rehearsal and some people who thought it was language exercise. And it is more of a language exercise because it does have really a very strong grammatical focus. So let's try another one. This is one called The Best Liar. Okay, this one was a little bit harder because it could actually be an activation task or a communicative task. So it does activate some of the language needed, and then there's a lot of communication that goes on with the mingling. So if you chose B or D, you would be right. So let's look at brainstorm. Okay, this is very interesting, and I did have a question about how is a rehearsal task different from a language one, and I did say that I was going to answer those at the end. However, I can see from this one here that people were having a lot of trouble. And this is actually a rehearsal task because of the relationship to the real world task. Like, even though the first part talks about the grammar of using the verbs, the second part has something that you would probably possibly do in real life, and actually has the part of figuring out if you're having trouble communicating to someone. So I just kind of want to flip back a little ways, and we'll actually go back to those definitions. So just give me a second here. So here's the rehearsal task, and here's the definitions. So these are tasks that have a clear and transparent relationship to real world tasks. And here's some examples of those tasks. So your family is house or car shopping. You can write a paragraph. You can exchange a description with a partner, explain your choice to a partner. And then I also got asked why it's not a communicative task. So let's just look at, I think we've all figured out the language exercise part is it's more focused on the grammar. And then communicative activity. Sorry, Will. Where was my... So there is some communicative activity within that, but it is closer to what a rehearsal task would be. I hope that helps a bit going back. And this is the next one. This is a listening one. So let's have a quick poll of this and see if we do better with this one. So for this one, if you said A, you would be right. This is a rehearsal task, and it does have to do with like a real world task. They're listening to people, dialogues of people phoning in to cancel their shifts or saying why they will be late. So these are things that students would actually might have to do in the real world. I've done this similar activity to this with the Link students, where we actually create dialogues about what to say if you're going to phone in sick and what your supervisor might say, so what you might hear. So this is a good real world task for students. I don't know if they've, yeah, there's, for this one here, they're just filling in the chart. So that doesn't have that communicative activity to it. With my students, they did more than listen. They actually ended up creating their own, and that became more of a communicative task. But we rehearsed it first by listening to what people would say in the real world task. Then we switched over to the communicative activity where they actually had to create their own. So I hope that helps kind of clarify the difference between communicative task and a rehearsal task. And then language exercise does have more to do with the grammatical focus. And then, what was the last one? The activation task, which is, just having a quick look. Oh, that is where they could, that the task doesn't necessarily have to do with real world. That was where I had my sinking ship example, where they wouldn't really be prepared to sink or be strand shipwrecked, but they could have a lot of other language skills like negotiation, and where they're talking about how much or how many things that they would need to take with them. So let's try another one now that I've tried to clarify again. And some of the examples are in your handout. So if you're not sure, you can kind of have a look at the examples in the handout. All right, so it looks like most of you got this one, because this is a language exercise because there's so much focus on the function. Even in the listening, basically it's telling you to listen for different function and write down the phrases in language and strategies that are used. So there is emphasis and focus on function with this one. How about impromptu speeches? Anybody else? All right, here's an interesting thing about this one. A lot of you said it was communicative activity, which there's a lot of communication in it. And yes, I do agree that it could be viewed as a communicative activity. So, but there's one other choice, and that would be a rehearsal task for a real world task. Sarah, the lady who did this activity, says she considers it to be a rehearsal task because students are actually presenting and they're given feedback and they have a rubric. So it could be based on a presentation for school. But I agree with most people that it also has a very strong communicative activity part to it because you are doing a lot of speaking and talking and during your presentation. So I agree with A and D. Yeah, it's not like the sinking ship. Okay, this one's called a report an absence role play. All right. Those of you who said A, you're absolutely right. It is definitely a rehearsal task for the real world where you're role playing an absence. So it's something that they would actually have to do in the real world. And even though it's a rehearsal, these things would happen. And once you rehearse them, it makes it so much easier for the students to do them in real life. So I hope everybody's kind of getting a good idea of where we're going here with this. Here's number 10. You might want to carefully read the instructions on this one. Okay, most of you put that this was a language exercise. Most of the focus should not have been on the grammatical, although there is a portion because it talks about verbs followed by the infinitive. So there's actually also a component of communicative activity, and there's actually a little bit of a rehearsal task within this one activity. It kind of combines all three. Technically, you're focusing on form, but you're not giving them the exact things to say for the grammatical. So I would say that yes, there's a strong C component, but there's also a bit of A and a little bit of D. Yes, I would say that most of this one is grammar. Okay, I'm sorry that I didn't have the definitions into the chat. I should have probably done that. I'm hoping that we're kind of getting that. The rehearsal has more of a real world task to it. The activation is something that they aren't really necessarily rehearsing for, but it has some activities within it that they would use. So that's the sinking ship one. That's the one where you, like I said, you might be using some different forms and things with it. The language exercise has more to do with grammar, and the communicative is more talking communication. There's some focus on form. Does that help a little bit? I'm hoping. And we'll try, I think it's the last one that we are going to do. I'm not sure if there's one more after this one, but this one for sure. So let's try another one. Okay, I think everybody's done on that one. So absolutely, it is a rehearsal task. There's a real world task component to it. As well, there's a communicative activity. So there's a lot of meaning on communication with some form on focus. And there's just a hint of language exercise because we're really not so much focusing on the grammar part, more on the form. So there's definitely A and D and maybe just a hint of C in this one. So if you did that, you did well. Okay, let's try the last one. It's called Physical Portrait Task. And yes, tasks can have multiple aspects, and it depends on exactly where you're making your complete focus. Those ones had a little bit of each, but the main one I think was the rehearsal task for that one. All right, I think I'm ready to publish this one. Okay, let's have a look at this one because it's very interesting the way that you have come up with, most people have come up with it as being a communicative activity where really the focus is not the communication. It's more activation. And it's definitely not a rehearsal activity because there's not, I think most people have recognized that you wouldn't necessarily be doing this in real life where you're explaining something to somebody and they have to draw it. There is absolutely no focus on language, so that's, or actually I should say grammar, so that's good. That's not a language exercise and everybody recognized that. But the communication here is very one way. It's just the person giving description. So it's more of an activation because it uses a range of language functions and structures that you might use in the real world, but not necessarily for this particular type of task. And Catherine, yes, I think you're right. You say that this could be practiced for describing a lost senior or child to the police and things like that. But there would be more communication because that would be more questions and answers. So it would be more communicative. But it's just activating the language in a different type scenario. So no, not really a rehearsal task. I don't think I've ever had to describe anybody to the police, but the lost purse one was more of one that would be a real world activity where if you lost your purse. This one for drawing the face, just an activation to use the language. So I've actually kind of gone a little bit fast through some of this stuff. Would you like to go back over, since we have time, I think maybe we should go back over some of the definitions. So I'm going to back it up a little bit and then we will do another discussion here. Because I really want you to get this because for our next one, we really kind of want to be looking at the different types of things that we can do to create a task. So let me go back. And let's have another quick look. So rehearsal tasks. So the two main things to remember about these is they have a clear, transparent relationship to the real world task. So you can actually see what they have to do with the real world. So those are things like phoning in sick, practicing phoning in sick. Things like maybe having to fill out a form to register for school. Another type of task could be making a resume, writing a resume, things like that. There's like real world tasks to them. Yes, a rehearsal task is like a real task that you would have to do at some point in your life. And we just practice them within the classroom so that when it actually comes to it, it could be done. It might not be a little, it could even be things like having a parent-teacher interview, like what kinds of questions do you want to ask the teacher? What kinds of things the teacher might say to you? I know I've had students from other countries where they only get called into the schools when their child is in trouble. So having a rehearsal and telling them what a parent-teacher interview is all about is just another rehearsal activity. It's not they're not doing the real thing necessarily, but they're rehearsing for it so that when it happens, they have an idea of what's going to happen. A rehearsal task for me would have been when I lived out of the country, having somebody take me through the steps of what was going to happen at the bank. So when I got to the bank, I would have known what to do, even if some of the stuff might have been a little bit different. So again, there's some examples. So activation tasks. These tasks might not have such a clear connection, but they're used to encourage learners to activate a range of language, functions, and structures. So this is the shipwreck example that I gave. We don't expect people to get shipwrecked, but what kinds of things do they need? They could talk about negotiating, they could agree, disagree. You could even talk about things like the Survivor movie and stuff like that. Enabling. So this is work that learners do to develop the skills and knowledge that they will need to accomplish tasks. So sometimes you'll be building the language and skills, and there's different ways that we can do this. There's the enabling activities. They're usually form-focused activities. So you do that to develop the language skills and knowledge your students might need to accomplish a task. And it says we can do these through the two different types, the language exercises or the communicative activities. So here's an example of a language exercise with a lexical focus. Another language exercise with grammatical focus. And here we have our communicative activity, which is usually a lot of speaking goes on between students with this one. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a real world task. Like here, they're just looking for someone who has driven a car, a racing car, things like that. Communicative is a lot of speaking. There could be some writing. Confused about activation and communicative. So Catherine says, rehearsal action and enabling. Yes, exactly. Rehearsal activation, and then enabling is the language and communicating. Am I doing okay here? Does anybody else have a burning question? So here's what they're talking about, the essential difference between enabling activities and tasks. So enabling activities focus on, did the learners get the language right? Did they use it correctly? Then the tasks go beyond that. Everybody's good now? I'm hoping. So let's just have another look at these. So the ability interview was definitely D, the communicative activity, focusing on actually using the language can and can't. And they're doing an interview, so they're interviewing the other students. And this one here is language exercise because it is very focused on grammatical structure. And then poll 3. This one was mostly the language exercise again with grammatical focus. This one had kind of a two-part where there's an activation task, but it's also a communicative activity. Especially part number 3, where they're taking turns telling people their 2 statements, asking and answering questions and statements. That's definitely a lot of communication there. Then the brainstorming. So tell your partner about things you can and can't do. And it's considered a rehearsal task because it's things that a conversation that you could have in the real world, I guess. Number 6, definitely, this one is definitely a rehearsal task. Very clear outcome, very clear value as a real world task. This one here, language exercise, the focus is on function. And most people got that one, so that was good. This one here was more of a rehearsal task for the real world. And number 9, the role play. Most people got that one right as being a rehearsal task. A lot of real world tasks. 10 was a split again between the rehearsal task and a communicative activity. And 11 again was a rehearsal task and a communicative activity with meaningful communication with a little bit of focus on form. And our last one was an activation task because it's using it's acting a wide range of language functions and structures for use in a task. So this is just something to think about what makes some tasks succeed and others fail. And these are just some kind of reflection questions for you. So maybe students, if something wasn't working, maybe students didn't have the linguistic resources to do the task. Maybe the task was too complicated or the directions were too confusing, or maybe the task itself was too unstructured. So as instructors, we all like to reflect on our lessons and why they did or didn't work. And I personally have planned tasks only to realize that students didn't have the vocabulary to complete the task, or that I had to ask them to complete a task that was too complex for their CLB level. Sometimes the instructions haven't been clear. Sometimes I think I could have maybe structured it a little bit better. And, that's what we do. We kind of learn from our mistakes and we like to reflect back and think about why it did or didn't work. Sometimes maybe we've just given them way too much in one chunk. So when considering a potential pedagogical task and thinking about how to design it, we need to think about the demands that the task will place on the students. So if the demands are too high or too low, learners can go off task. They can become disengaged, discouraged, bored, annoyed. So when designing a task, we should take a look at the following demands and take them into consideration. So things like the linguistic complexity, the communicative stress, and then the cognitive demands. So are we gearing them towards our students? Are we focusing on what the learners can do and where we're going to take them with those tasks? Sorry, I need to go back again. Okay, the other thing we need to do, we should consider processing in the whole scheme of things too, because processing includes things like the organization of our material, how much computing is necessary, clarity of information type, number of steps in a task, the amount of content to be provided, and how much you have to be able to remember. Cognitive load theory involves understanding how many discrete units of information can be retained in short-term memory before information loss occurs. So don't go giving them too much with those cognitive demands. That's where I've had a lot of, experience in thinking, like how much should we do? Should I give them, I observed a lesson the other day where there were 31 things on paper that the students were supposed to choose from, and the instructor afterwards said when I asked her, what would you do differently? She said, I would definitely have cut that down to maybe 5 because there was just too many and it made the game she was playing far too complicated. And we're going to end a little bit maybe early here. I'm not sure. But today we defined the term task and we looked at what task-based language teaching is. We've also discussed the different types of activities found in a task-based language classroom. And if you look back at the framework on page 8 of your handout, you'll see that a task-based learning language teaching class will have some of each of the different types of activities in the bottom row of the framework. So some people feel that grammar is not taught in a task-based language classroom, but that's not true. Grammar is taught, but it is taught so it's clearly connected to the task at hand. So I'm kind of basically done for now, and I really do appreciate that everyone came out. And I do want you to think about the classes that you've taught and whether or not you do a selection of the types of activities that we've talked about, or do you mainly focus on one or the other? And tasks are central in task-based language teaching, but a task-based language teaching class will have a selection of all kinds of activities. If you have only if you only have language exercise, what might be some of the limitations on your teaching? And what about if you only had activation or communication activities? So it's important to consider these things when designing your class and designing the activities, because basically you can have a variety of activities. And as we've seen, some of the activities we do contain different tasks within them. So you can actually get a lot out of one task with a bunch of different activities within it. So if there's any questions, that kind of ends our session.
Thanks, Jeannie. We actually are ending right on time because we didn't take a break.
Oh, I wasn't sure if I was going to have time for a break, so sorry about that, but that's good.
Can you give us a little tidbit for part 2?
Oh, absolutely. Hang on. So for next week's webinar in part 2, we're going to be looking at designing and assessing tasks. So that will be basically what we're looking at. So we'll be using some of the information that we've gone through today, and we will definitely be looking at how to create a task and how to assess our tasks.
How exciting. I can hardly wait.
Hopefully
Thank
my
you very
timing will be
much.
good next week too.
Oh, Catherine has a question. Assessing tasks or making an assessment task?
We are actually going to be, I believe, assessing our tasks.
All right. So we look forward to seeing everybody next Tuesday night at the same time. Thank you very much, Jeannie.
Well, thank you everyone for being here, and I look forward to seeing everybody again next week.
All right. To log out, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a box with an arrow in it, and that's the log out button.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.